Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Troy Mix, and I'm Associate Director of the University of Delaware's Institute for Public Administration, IPA for short. Welcome to the May 8th edition of a local government lunch and learn webinar series co-sponsored by IPA and the City Management Association of Delaware. Today's topic is managing your well-being, and I'll just remind everyone, please feel free to submit your questions using chat and the Q&A function as the presentation is going on. We certainly welcome your engagement. And let's get to today's speaker, who is a master's of social work and has worked in the training arena at the University of Delaware for several years. And she's currently a doctoral student in the Biden School of Public Policy and Administration. Welcome to Jennifer Daniels. And Jen, the show is all yours.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, Troy. First off, thank you guys so much for being here. And just to give you guys just a little bit of more background about what I've done in terms of my professional career, I did start in the University of Delaware's internal employee assistance program. So I have done counseling and provided different wellness tips to clients and faculty and staff, as well as students. And my hopes are to really bring some of that information here for you guys, hoping that you'll be able to take away some tangible skills or things that you can start doing to really help manage your entire well-being. I will keep, we have a question and answer portion at the end of this presentation, so feel free to send them in now as we go. I can stop, or you can save it for the end, and I'll address some of those questions that we have as we go through the presentation. So let's go ahead and jump right into talking about, well, what is well-being and what do we mean by that when we say so? So generally speaking, when we're talking about our well-being, we're speaking to that overall contentment or contentness with being healthy and happy and comfortable with our entire well-being or the different facets of our life. And so when we're speaking to well-being, we're talking about all of those different components that make us who we are, whether it's the physical, the spiritual, our jobs, obviously occupational, environmental, taking all of those different facets of who we are and really trying to promote wellness and happiness in the different facets of our lives. Now, what's important about our well-being right now is, how is COVID affecting that? What is that looking like? How are things changing? And so when we speak about COVID and how this is impacting our life, the first thing we have to remember here is that before COVID started, our life was already happening, okay? So whether it was our home life, our social life, our work life, things were already transpiring in those different facets of our life. Now we add COVID into this, and now we can see different aspects of our lives are being affected. The way that we work, how we're dealing with our families or our partners, or even just our social life. What are you accustomed to doing on a regular basis? All of that is changing. Now, what's important to realize about COVID and this particular situation that we're all experiencing is that it is going to bring in multi-dimensions of stress and or grief. That is absolutely a real thing. If you've ever had an experience with this and you're saying, oh my gosh, I don't feel like my normal self, things don't feel quite the same, that is a real emotion. And so what we're losing is that loss of normalcy, just our regular routine, what we're accustomed to doing every day. I'll tell you for myself, every single morning before I start my day, I was accustomed to going to Wawa for a cup of coffee, right? Something as small, right, and seems innocuous, not that big of a deal, has changed my entire routine and the way that I work, right? Losing that connection or identity, even purpose. I know a lot of us can be worried about our families, our loved ones, right? We may have elderly people in our families, and even thinking about our own health and worrying about death or illness, and even, of course, the financial pressures that we all may be experiencing, or what our constituents may be experiencing, is a real thing, and that is going to impact our well-being. And so being able to take notice of that and what that can look like. And so that kind of brings us to this next point in saying, well, how do I check in to make sure everything is going okay? Or how can I check in with my body and my mental health, and figuring out what may be going on. How can I start with an intervention of some sort? And this is important. Now, I know a lot of you may be managing other employees, or you may be working with your constituents, or just thinking about yourself or your own family. And where I'll be guiding you in terms of that is thinking first about, how can I take better care of myself? When we are taking better care of ourselves, we can better help other people, whether it's our colleagues, our constituents, our supervisees, our children, our friends, our family, but it starts with you first, right? So really being able to identify what is happening and what I may be experiencing at this time. And so kind of using this checklist, right? These signs of acute stress and or burnout. And it's important to realize, again, you may have already been experiencing some of these symptoms, right, with the type of work that you do or the type of job you had, or with managing your family or your children. But if these things can be exasperated with the unprecedented circumstances that we're in right now. And so checking in to see, am I more fatigued than I normally am? Have I experienced an increase in my anxiety, right? Am I getting sick more often? How's my work productivity? Am I able to work the same way that I was working? Am I producing? Is my body tense? Or what's happening with my sleeping? These are all different areas that you can start taking notice of. Now, it's important, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the workshop. Often, I will encourage people, if things become unmanageable, going to your doctor, right? Going to seek professional help. But before we cross that threshold, thinking about, well, what can I do now to start mitigating some of these effects? What can I do as an intervention now? And now, of course, I know some of us can deal with some clinical depression or other clinical medical issues. But before, and that is a real thing as well, okay? That is a real thing, and we want everyone to be well. But often what can also happen here is that some of these acute signs of stress and burnout, they can materialize into bigger issues, right? So really trying to do this early intervention and recognizing right now, where am I struggling and how can I start doing things now within my control, again, to mitigate some of the effects of these things that we may be experiencing. So I'm going to go into these next couple of slides and group some of these areas together, some of these symptoms that you may be feeling, and we'll talk about how we can intervene on ourselves to help ourselves get over some of these experiences that we may be having. And so that'll take us first into, how do we go about tackling these feelings of depression, hopelessness, and social isolation. And again, just reminding you all that what you are experiencing, what we are experiencing, is very real. These are real emotions. These are real ways that our lives are being affected. So don't trivialize it, right? Because even though I'm telling you, hey, these are things that you can do, these are things we should be mindful of, I'm also giving myself the same advice, right? Because I'm in the same boat as you, experiencing some of the same things that you may be experiencing. And so when we jump into thinking about depression and hopelessness, or dealing with just the social isolation, what can we do? And the first step that you can take is being able to identify a safe space to share your feelings and emotions with someone. Now, of course, this can be tricky with our living situations. You may live with multiple people in your household. You may live in a one-bedroom apartment and not have a lot of space or a private area where you can talk to someone. And for those of you that have those types of constraints, encouraging you to take it outside, right? Take those phone calls outside, talk to your friends, take those meetings. And I'll even use myself in this last week, because I definitely have been feeling a little stir crazy with everything is online. All of my meetings are on Zoom. I'm at my desk nonstop. I had a working meeting and I took the meeting outside. I muted myself, and when it was time for me to talk, I said, hey, everyone, you might hear some cars passing by because I'm literally walking down Otts Chapel Road right now because I can't stay in my house. Those are just small things that you can do to create some space for yourself. Another option and another resource that many of us will have as state employees or UDEL employees is really being able to connect to some of those internal employee assistance programs or external employee assistance programs. Now, HMS for UDEL employees, I know offers 5 free sessions right now, and they can do everything from connecting you to financial planning, to trying to find a therapist, you name it. Same as for state employees, Health Advocate is your resource. Call those resources and get connected to the help that you need. I can tell you right now, for example, Aetna Insurance and I believe Blue Cross Blue Shields, they are offering free telehealth counseling services. So generally, when you were trying to see a therapist or talk to someone, that would cost you 20 to 30 bucks for your copay. Right now, given the COVID circumstances, you can get free telehealth counseling services. So that's at your disposal. Make sure that you are trying to connect to that and get the help that you need. Another thing you can do if you don't feel comfortable talking to a therapist or talking to someone else about what you're experiencing, doing some internal self-work. Small writing exercises just to release what you're experiencing and what you're feeling. Something small is journaling or making a list of the things that you're grateful for. I definitely have been doing that for myself, right? Because there's so much despair and negativity that we're seeing and what's happening in the news and what's happening with people's lives right now. Sometimes just taking a moment to find gratitude for the things that you do have. For me, myself, I say to myself, I have a roof over my head, I have food to eat, right? My bills are paid, right? These are things that help me stay present in the moment and feel better about the circumstances that are going on. And then the last piece in that is connecting to these online communities. They are popping up everywhere. There are definitely free resources and community groups online right now that you can connect with other people like yourself who are dealing with the things that you may be dealing with. So again, just really looking for that connectivity, which is something all of us need right now in this time. And so now moving into how do we tackle some of these emotional and physical fatigue or sleep deprivation? And so this is a really, really, really important one here because your sleep and your body and how you're feeling all connect or intertwine with your emotional state, right? And your ability to be able to focus and get your work done or be there for others. And so some things that we should be mindful of in this time is thinking about our screen time usage. Now, for most of us, all of this has pretty much all of our work day is pretty much online for the most part. We are on our computers nonstop, probably more than we ever have been, right? So we can't really avoid the Zoom meetings. We can't avoid the emails, but understanding that our brain is still going to be processing screen time is screen time. And so I say to a lot of employees or other people that I'm talking to within these groups, knowing that our brain cannot tell the difference between whether we're scrolling through Facebook on our laptop or on our iPad or on our phones, but we can't tell the difference between that and the Zoom meetings. So knowing that something has to give in terms of the time or the capacity that we have to give towards online screen time. So really trying to limit that where you can, which unfortunately ends up having to be with the social engagement online or text messaging, things of that sort, but trying to just reduce it where you can. Developing a bedtime and wake up routine, again, is going to be really, really important for how we take care of ourselves and deal with some of this fatigue. And so a great thing that you can do here is really starting to kind of have an unwinding routine before bed, whether that's stretching, yoga, reading a book, listening to some relaxing music, whatever works for you. I have things here that obviously may be helpful for you, but they may not be helpful for you. You might have other things that are relaxing for you or for your bedtime routine. So whatever that is, do that, do what works, but really just, again, trying to establish a routine. When we think about waking up in the morning, okay, and I'll talk about this in the next slide when we get there, but trying not to flood our minds in the beginning of the day with negativity, right? So I really try to avoid looking at the news or looking at social media as soon as I open my eyes. I try to put something positive, whether it's a podcast, if you're a spiritual person, whether that's praying, if you are someone who likes to journal or stretch or yoga, doing something that can give you a clear mind before you start your day and at the end of the day as you're winding down. And that kind of connects to this next point of making sure that we're trying to really create a good sleeping environment. And so this is, again, that hard part where we have our professional lives, our workspace is now our home space. Our home space is now our workspace. So giving some extra attention to our sleeping environment, making sure, again, that we're trying to be tidy. Again, I struggle with this as well, but I've noticed that when I put more attention into making sure that I'm keeping the space where I sleep pretty clear, that's been helpful for me being able to relax and go to sleep at night. And then, of course, if none of these things are working and you are still experiencing fatigue or exhaustion, or you're not sleeping very well, talk to your doctor. This is really where you're going to want to get some of this professional help in to deal with some of these things. I want to jump in really quick because there is a question. Something I could share with others, particularly right. I don't have a problem, Susama, with you sharing this this deck with other people. That's no problem at all. Thank you for asking. And so let's go into the next slide, talking about, well, how do we start tackling now some of this anxiety and poor frustration tolerance that we may be having? Now, again, I will use myself as an example here. Absolutely, I've noticed that my patience is a little bit shorter, right? Things that would not normally bother me or would not normally get under my skin all of a sudden become problematic, right? And so that was one thing that I had to notice was, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more anxious since COVID has started, right? How do I relax myself? How do I let go of some of these frustrations, okay? And one of the first things that you can start doing really is deep breathing exercises. When we are taking deep breaths, okay, oxygen in, deep breaths of oxygen into our body, that is slowing down our heart rate, okay? Giving us a moment to really just pause. And I have on here Apple Watch. You might have a watch for your Droid, but there's so many different apps and technology. So like on your Apple Watch, there's a breathing app that you don't have to pay for that just does, you can set it to do minute breathing exercises throughout your day to just help release some of the anxiety that you may be experiencing. I also say YouTube is your friend. Literally, if you want to learn how to do anything in the world, you can find it on YouTube, as well as breathing exercises. They have that on YouTube. Really starting to engage in any type of meditation and mindfulness. Again, these are just things where we're trying to take a moment to slow down and release any tension that we may be feeling. Now, here are a couple of apps that I have in there. Calm, Breathe, it is spelled with 2 E's like that. These are apps that provide guided meditation or breathing techniques that you can be engaged in. Headspace and Oak are other apps. You do have to pay for those ones. I use Headspace. Now, the fee for that, I know for students for Headspace, you can do that for $10 a month. For everyone else, I believe it's about $10 a year. And for a regular membership, it's about $60 for a year. But I'm telling you, you can find everything on there, from bedtime routines to calming music to nature sounds to breathing exercises. These are all things that are right at our disposal that we can use to just take a moment. Physical activity is absolutely going to be important. Now, I will say this, I don't want you to feel like you need to go run 12 miles in order to keep your mind together and sound. Some physical activity can be something as small as taking a 5 to 10 minute walk every day, right? Just moving away from your desk, moving away from the computer, and taking a small walk, walking your dog, walking with your kids while they ride their bike, whatever the case may be, really just trying to get moving, get the blood pumping, releasing some of those endorphins that are going to help you feel better. And then lastly, relying on that peer support. Now, I know in moments like this, a lot of us, obviously we are physically isolated from our friends and some of our family, and we can tend to want to withdraw, which I noticed in myself as well. But really trying to shoulder into that and talk to our different friends, family, constituents, people that we can connect with to really provide that support, because we are all experiencing this or impacted by COVID in some way, somehow. And so now we'll go into talking about poor diet and illness and even muscle tension. Again, understanding that what we're feeding our body impacts the way that we feel and how we're able to move throughout the day. And so just thinking about what we're putting into our body, limiting sugar and caffeine. Now, let me say this. I am not condemning anyone about the types of foods that you're bringing into the house, because this is coming from the person who ate all of the quarantine snacks within the first 2 weeks of COVID, okay? I'm not proud of that, but I realized that I needed to do something different, right? Like, what am I bringing into the house? What am I consuming? And how is this contributing to how my body feels, how my mind feels? So thinking about the food that we're keeping in our house and what we're eating and how that impacts us. Really just taking a chance, taking an opportunity to get outside. Right now, all of our state parks are currently open, and you don't have to pay to go. So White Clay Creek, Brandywine Creek, wherever the state parks are open. Now, you do have to have a mask if you're within 6 feet of people. So I go out to White Clay often, and I hit the trails and I get myself in nature. And if I'm passing someone, I'll put my mask on. But for the most part, I don't pass a lot of people, but making sure that you're just getting outside, using natural relaxers, anything, again, that's just going to really give you some of that calming feeling, whether it's lavender, candles, chamomile tea, whatever works for you, just trying to do things that naturally help you relax. Now, this is an important one here, identifying and scheduling a time to eat, stretch, and work out. We can get so busy within our day that we overlook the small things, like taking a lunch break, right? It's so easy to get consumed with our emails or consumed with our employees that we forget to do the normal things that we would have done in the office. Put it on your calendar. So the same way that you provide service to other people and you make sure that everyone else is good and you show up for others, show up for yourself. Put yourself on the calendar to give yourself that time to rejuvenate, relax, and step away from the work or whatever else is going on in your life. And so that takes us now really, as we kind of talked about a lot of these different ways that we should be thinking about ourselves, also sharing this with our constituents, sharing this with our students, sharing this with some of our employees. Now thinking about our professional self-care and our personal self-care. Understanding that both of these areas are going to require attention and focus, and they're going to require you to implement practices and making sure that both are taken care of. If we're not attending to our professional self-care or professional boundaries, that can impact our personal life, our personal self-care. And if we're not tending to our personal self-care, that can affect the way that we show up to work or how we're able to get our jobs done. And so when we're speaking about professional self-care, we're saying, how do we engage in practices that help me do my job well? When we're talking about personal self-care, that's saying holistically, how can I make sure I'm doing things that promote my holistic health and well-being of myself? And so now kind of jumping into areas with professional self-care, what can we make sure we're doing with professional self-care? The first thing that we can do with professional self-care is monitoring our workload and time management. Again, because our workspace is our home space and our home space is our workspace, it's very easy to blend the two together. But part of that professional self-care is going to be making sure that we're setting boundaries. When we working within our general work hours. Now, of course, when COVID first started, I know that a lot of us were working around the clock to get things situated, to get our constituents situated. So we were probably working out the norm. But now that COVID has now become the new norm, going back to those boundaries. If you worked a typical 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, really trying to maintain that. Unless it's an emergency, of course, then you might have to work in the evening or on a weekend. But trying to just, again, be as structured as possible. If you're someone that has a hard time with setting those boundaries, putting on away emails, telling your colleagues you're logging off for the day, turning off your work phone, whatever you have to do to really be able to create that space. I say making sure that you're taking breaks every hour. I use the Pomodoro method myself, which is built-in work breaks and work time as I go throughout the day. Making sure also that we're tending to how we're feeling about our work. If you need a break, that's okay. Use those mental health days, use those sick days. That's what it's for, so that you can be well. Making sure that if you are managing other people, or if you're managing your constituents or you're managing your employees, that you're creating space to support them. Checking in, seeing how they're doing. What do they need to feel supported in this situation? How can you be of service? And then on the other end of that is making sure that we're self-advocating for ourselves. People are not going to know what we need automatically unless we say, this is what I'm experiencing. Can you help me? So making sure we're self-advocating, and then making sure also that we are keeping kind of a positive attitude about what we are doing, right? So providing that revitalization and energy towards our work. And so this can be putting up quotes on your wall, positive reminders about the things that you're accomplishing within your role. Again, just reminding yourself that you're doing the best that you can, and really trying to focus on those positive aspects of our jobs and the things that we're doing. And now as we kind of go into personal self-care, kind of leaving this off, what can we do, again, outside of everything that we just spoke about, but making sure that we are maintaining awareness of our coping strategies. This is something that we'll have to check in with ourselves daily. Being well, it does require work, right? We have to check in daily and making sure we're doing something every day to maintain our wellness. I will tell you, when it comes to the news, okay, they're repeating the same cycles throughout the day. But every time we watch it, that can incite some anxiety for us. So really monitoring how much news do I need to consume? Usually 30 minutes to an hour is all you need to stay abreast of topics and issues that are going on. After that, let it go. Wait for tomorrow, right? Because we don't want this permeating our minds and how we feel throughout the day. Making sure we're intentional about doing the things that we love. So if you are a movie buff, if you like watching reality TV, reading books, whatever it is that brings you enjoyment, trying to connect to that. And lastly, just making sure that we're extending ourselves grace and patience. These are trying times for all of us. So really, the same way that we're being easy with our students or our constituents or our employees, really extending that same grace back to ourselves is going to make sure that we can really get through this as best as we can. And hopefully this will be over soon, guys. I really hope so. This will be over soon, and that these are things that some of these personal self-care we can take with us into the future as we really work on our wellness. And so let's go ahead and move into Q&A. Does anyone have any questions that I can answer right now about things that you may be experiencing, or anything you would like me to clear up? Please feel free to go ahead and ask that into the Q&A box. Give you guys a moment there.
Jen, this is Troy. Really quickly, could you give some advice on supervisors or managers kind of who might feel challenged providing wellness advice to their employees or offering them resources? What are some good ways to do that in a tactful way that doesn't put you on the spot for being a professional on wellness?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's a great question, Troy. So the first thing that I would suggest people to do, one is just to create the space for people to be able to share, right? And keep it open-ended, because people will give you what they're comfortable with. And so I always say, start with, how are you managing? How are you doing? Is there any way I can provide support, right? So kind of let the employee or the constituent really take the rein on what they would like to address or what they're experiencing. And if you're not comfortable providing feedback on how they can manage it, really referring them to some of the resources that we talked about earlier, whether it's an internal employee assistance program, HMS, or health advocate, telling them to speak to a counselor or a therapist, right? Encouraging them to seek some of those professional resources is really going to be important. But ultimately, just providing the space, asking someone, how is everything going? How are you managing? Is there any way that I can be supportive? Usually on the receiving end, that will create a space for someone to be able to talk about the things that they need. I think I see another question here. Okay, so someone said, now that there's so much politics intertwined, I feel like my normal peer support groups are no longer people I can talk to about this stuff because it ends up political. This is leaving me with an even greater sense of loss. Absolutely, this is true. And I will tell you for myself, one thing that I had to do for my well-being, I had to get off of Facebook. I had to get off of social media because of a lot of the political banter and negativity that was going on, right? And it was hard for me too, because I am an extrovert, I am a social person, so I do thrive off of being able to connect with others, but I really had to weigh the odds, right? Is connecting providing me more stress? Is this providing more stress on my plate? What are the pros and the cons? And for me, disconnecting was better for me than staying connected with these people. So you really have to look at that on an individual basis. We're all going to experience these things differently. And I do know that getting into the political arguments and debates is not really helpful right now for how any of us are feeling. So monitoring that and trying to find other like-minded people that may feel the way that you feel and can provide the support that you need is really, really going to be helpful. Thank you for that comment, because it's definitely true. Is there anyone else that has a comment or a concern or question that I can answer right now? Okay, well, if any of you do have questions after this presentation that you don't feel comfortable answering here in person, please feel free to email me. I will respond to you and provide you any resources that I can send your way. I would like to thank you guys so much for your time and for being here. I wish everyone well and to be healthy and to take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Jen.
No problem.
Okay, so I have now next week's webinar, we will have Representative Brian Shoup, who is a small business owner as well, and he's very involved in Downtown Milford Incorporated, to talk to us about how we can all work together toward the reopening, what we need to do to have customers feel safe, and a lot of really great ideas about the economic reopening. But before we go, I have two poll questions that I want to ask. One is, at this point, we are planned through next week. So the first question is, future Lunch and Learn webinars on various topics, do you believe that they would be helpful? Yes, no, and if so, what frequency? So we'll give you a few minutes on that, or not a few minutes, but a little bit of time. We might have lost some of our participants. No, we still have participants, so we'll give a few seconds on that. And then again, we hope you can join us next week. And then, you know, I think there's certainly been value in this, and there's benefit to extending on some basis. I'm not sure that weekly is sustainable. So, all right, so I'm ending polling, and so there does seem to be a general agreement that this has been helpful, and that either every other week or monthly. So thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week as we talk about the economic recovery.